welcome to the third annual Missoula Monologues. My name is Lexi Clawater. I'm from Livingston, Montana, which is a small town over by Bozeman, if you're familiar. When I was in high school, I was lucky enough to be a part of the Bozeman Monologues, which is a production put on by the Students Against Sexual Assault group at Montana State University. That's really what gave me the idea to start a monologues event in Missoula. So when I started my bachelor's degree here in 2015, kind of started getting the gears turning, and in 2016, the first installment happened. So we're on round 3. I'm really excited. It's gained momentum. Thank you all so much for being here and continuing that. To give you a little bit of background, this event builds on the concept that Eve Ensler introduced to the world via the Vagina Monologues. She interviewed over 200 women and took bits and pieces of their stories and put them together into this amazing production. The Women's Resource Center on campus puts this on every year in February. If you haven't been, would highly recommend. In fact, you should get your phone out right now, put in a reminder for like January to start looking at tickets. And while your phone's out, make sure it's silenced, please. Thank you. I love the Vagina Monologues. It's an amazing production, and I really think that this event expands on the concept of harnessing the power of personal narrative. So that's sort of the point of the Missoula Monologues, is to bring to you the stories of your neighbors and friends and family. All of the people who will be speaking tonight are Missoula community members and, again, friends, family, acquaintances, but most importantly, they're fellow human beings. All of the stories you will hear are bits and pieces of their lives. There is triggering information in many of the monologues, so if you feel overwhelmed or needed to step out, please do. That's not disruptive. It will be totally fine. Please take care of yourself. We also have 2 awesome counseling interns from the Curry Health Center. We have Bridget and Hannah. They are in the back on the right. You might see them waving right now. So if you need support, please go chat with them too during or after the show. Huge thank you to them for being here. I am very happy to say that I am graduating in 1 very long month from now, from today exactly, and I will be attending, close, getting there, and I will be attending graduate school out of the state of Montana. So this will be my last Missoula Monologues. However, I found a wonderful human to hand it off to next year, so they will continue. Please return. Because this is my last event, I want to start with a piece that I wrote. I will just give a little bit of a disclosure. It does include the phrase, the stranger rape myth. If you haven't heard of this, it does not mean that no one is raped by a stranger. That absolutely happens. This is referring to the fact that a lot of people think of rapists as these creepy men hiding in the bushes, and while they certainly can be and are, the vast majority of the time they're people that we know, which is incredibly hard to deal with, and I think that's why this myth exists. So just wanted to let you know that that's what I'm referring to in this piece. Otherwise, I will be starting with this piece, and then we will just follow through on program order. The only change is that Katie Kane is not able to make it tonight due to some extenuating circumstances, so I will give some closing comments after intermission and the following monologues, and then we will end with a monologue, which just makes sense to me instead of ending on me talking. Great. So this piece is called The Walk Home. The strong, fast-paced stride. You would think she was running late, but you would never know she was just running. The occasional, nearly unnoticeable alteration of her cadence. You would think her legs were uneven, but you would never know she was listening for footsteps in the spaces between her own. The hands shoved deeply into the pockets of her coat. You would think she was combating the cold, but you would never know the knife gripped defiantly under white knuckles. The long hair, twisted and tucked into the collar of her shirt. You would think she was preventing the wind from tugging it about, but you would never know her attempts to defeminize, dehumanize. The whirring of her mind. You would think she was pondering a crossword puzzle, but you would never know her relentless challenge to find an escape route, to pick the right safe house. The chanting in her head. You would think she was rehearsing lines for a play, but you would never know how descriptions of the passerby loop through her very being. Tall, heavy, white, dark brown hair, beard, blue jeans, black hoodie, red shoes. The danger of forgetting a single detail. Tall, heavy, white, dark brown hair, beard, blue jeans, black hoodie, red shoes. Just in case this time is the time she becomes the 1 in 1 in 4, 1 in 3, 1 in 2, 1 in 1. Tall, heavy, white, dark brown hair, beard, blue jeans, black hoodie, red shoes. The sudden lunge towards the door. You would think she was rushing to get out of the cold air, but you would never know her inability to suppress the urge to run any longer. The empty eyes staring past the dark ceiling. You would think her conscience was too busy to sleep, but you would never know the internal mechanism that prevents her from leaving the deadbolt unlocked. The fear. You would think her weak, fragile, timid, delicate, but you would never know the potent tenacity with which she walks. Or perhaps you do know. Perhaps you take a step forward in time with her. Perhaps you force yourself to go on a walk at night because you're sick and tired of this fear. Perhaps you know that your journey home is laced with the stranger rape myth. Perhaps you know that you're safer alone on the dark street than you are with an acquaintance 80% of the time. Perhaps this knowledge is not a sufficient antidote to the patriarchal hand wrapped around your throat. Perhaps the walk home is a foreign experience to you. I beg of you, with empathy as my witness, to remember that understanding does not require experience. Listen. Be sickened. Be violently ill that this is the world that we live in, and then do something about it. Demand more from yourself. Demand more from others. Demand respect on a human level. Respect. An entity to accompany her on the walk home.
Hi, my name is Rachel Siebel, and I am asexual. Now, if you've known me for pretty much any significant length of time, you know this. I wear this ring on my left middle finger, which is an asexual pride symbol. I wear ace pride buttons on my work lanyard. I've published writings about it online, and pretty much I don't shut up about it. And a lot of you are probably wondering why. I mean, how is who I want to have sex with or don't want to have sex with any of your business? Well, let me tell you just how hard it was for me to figure it out for myself. When I first started exploring my sexuality, I was in middle school. I had met a wonderful human being who presented as female at the time, and I was infatuated. I mean, they always knew how to make me laugh, they were perfect for me, or so I thought, and I identified as bi, decided to go for it, and we were in a relationship, so it can be called. And essentially, that was one of the worst decisions I really ever could have made. They were abusive, manipulative, and they shoved me out of my comfort zone in a lot of huge ways, one of which was talking about sex, sexual fantasies, and what I wanted. Constantly, they would ask me, what do you think of when you think about me? Do you think of me naked? Do you think of me sexually? And I never really knew what to answer because the answer was no, but why? I didn't understand. That was kind of when I stumbled upon the word asexual, and it seemed to describe me better than just about anything I'd found before. I mean, it wasn't foreign, I guess, and it fit a lot of things. It answered a lot of questions. So I decided next time they asked me about my sexual fantasies and desires that I would come out to them. And with that, I came out as asexual for the first time. As you can imagine, it didn't go that well. They told me that I was being selfish. They told me that I was lying to them. They told me that I must not really love them if I didn't want to have sex with them. And they ended up just overall condemning me for who I was. I very quickly reversed, and I decided that I must have been mistaken. that it must have just been the abuse, or it must have just been because they'd just come out to me as trans and I didn't understand because I came from a small town where LGBT representation was non-existent. But there was something deeper. And I kind of tried to piece through it, but I just didn't understand. I mean, I wasn't straight since I had a crush on someone who, for a while, I thought was female, but I wasn't gay either because I'd had crushes on guys. I mean, bisexual and pansexual seemed kind of close, but identifying as any of those just seemed like shoving a puzzle piece into a slot where it didn't fit. The picture didn't look right, and you just wanted it to fit there, but it didn't. And so for a while, I thought that I was just nothing, a mistake. Well, fast forward to the actual first time I could experience sexual attraction, or an experience that has inherent sexual attraction. A couple years after that, I found a boyfriend. I met him at a debate tournament. He was absolutely wonderful, and we had so much in common. We hung out a few times as friends, decided we were interested in each other, went on a date, and I had my first kiss at the age of 16. And it was literally just mouths pressing together. The world didn't spin, nothing stopped, and it didn't feel like that magical fairy tale moment. But then I pulled away and I looked into his eyes, and I could see in that moment how happy he was, how fulfilled he felt, and how much in that moment I was his world. And even though I hadn't loved the action, I absolutely loved the intimacy of the moment. And that was when I realized that romantic and sexual attraction weren't one and the same. And I came back to that word, asexual. With that idea now that I didn't necessarily have to hate sex or actions that might have sexual arousal like kissing, I started to become more comfortable in the label of ace. I realized that I could even enjoy things like sex with a partner just for the emotional intimacy without actually having to experience sexual attraction. Ultimately, at its purest, asexual means that you can't just look at a person and experience sexual arousal. There has to be something more, something different. So by the time I confidently identified as asexual, I was 18, moving out of high school, coming to college. That was a year ago. And it was great for a while, but then I discovered a new problem, that persistent feeling of aloneness. See, if you're a member of the LGBT plus community and you are one of the letters L, G, B, or T, you can usually find some representation that fits you. Lots of celebrities have come out, for example, Ellen DeGeneres, Adam Rippon, Laverne Cox, Brendan Urie. There's plenty of different people out there who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. You can generally find someone of your gendered identification and your sexuality. But if you're part of that plus, oftentimes you get kind of swept to the side. If there's ever asexual characters, for one, it's very rarely ever explicitly stated, and for another, they're usually the butt of a joke. Their asexuality is a character flaw to be overcome. The development is when they decide to have sex and when they grow out of their juvenile tendencies. And on top of that, a lot of the LGBT community doesn't think that ace people belong. Now, when I say a lot, I don't necessarily mean the most voices. I know the majority of LGBT plus people are accepting to aces, but there are a vocal few. I remember in June logging into Twitter on Pride Month and being so excited to see some positivity, and one of the first tweets I saw was, "Happy Pride Month to everybody except asexuals who think they're LGBT." People call us cishets just trying to belong. People who are cisgender and hetero, either sexual or romantic, just trying to fit into a community. So I'm in a fun place where, to some people, I'm not straight enough to be straight, I'm not heterosexual enough to be straight, but I'm also not queer enough to be LGBT+. I live in this just weird area of, yet again, being nothing. And even when you're a confident asexual, it's really hard when you're afraid of other people who accept it. Every time I come out to someone, even if I know that they're LGBT, I have to sit there and wonder, is this the time I'm going to have to sit there and justify my queerness? Sit there and talk about how I am actually LGBT because I've been romantically interested in women. How I have to sit there and talk about this discourse of how asexuals do really belong. Because I don't want my coming out to just come with a bunch of discourse. And then there's the issue of finding a partner. Since I'm not aromantic, I would really like a romantic partner. It would be nice. But every time, I have to sit there and second guess. Am I just someone's second choice? Am I just a second option? Am I something that someone is going to settle for Am I forever doomed to be nothing more than a compromise? Luckily, it is getting better. I saw some of my first asexual representation in a really great Netflix-produced show called BoJack Horseman. And as I followed one of the characters through his journey, I got some incredible asexual representation. For one, the word asexual was explicitly used. The character said in plain terms, I am asexual. Because we got to see his journey. We got to see him try and figure out who he was, get past that hump of maybe I'm nothing, and slowly come more into himself. We got discussions of the difference between being asexual and aromantic. We got discussions about the spectrum of asexuality. It was absolutely incredible, and I can't help but think that if more and more people see this, maybe more people will be accepting of ace people, or even be more apt to figure out that they're not nothing, that they are asexual. So if you're still wondering why I keep talking about asexuality, I really don't know what to tell you. It's taken me so long to be proud of who I am. It's taken me years and years of getting through abuse, of getting through self-loathing, and I'm not about to stop using it. I'm not about to hide behind presumed heterosexuality. I'm not about to be disingenuous. I am asexual. And I'm not just saying this for me. I'm saying this for anybody out there who might also be questioning. If you out there think that you might be asexual, I'm here to tell you that you are not nothing. You are not alone. You are valid, and we're here for you. The ACE community is here to help you through your journey. If you think you're ace, great. If you start thinking you're ace and think that maybe you're not later, that's great too. The journey of self-discovery is just that, a journey. It's not linear, it's not the same for everybody. And I'm happy to help see you through it. And there's a community of amazing people that's also happy to see you through it. And for anyone here who's bothered by my speech, who might be thinking that I am just being ridiculous, I have one thing to say. Asexual people are wonderful, we're beautiful, we are incredible, amazing badasses who have been through so much to figure out who we are, and you know what? We're not going anywhere. Thank you.
Good evening. I am Ibrahim Mena and I am Venezuelan. When people know that I am Venezuelan, I am often asked, how is the situation in Venezuela? It is as bad as we see in the news. My answer is always about the same. It is worse. I try to give them some context for my answer, but I always feel like I never had enough words to describe how bad my country is. Tonight, I want to do my very best to explain it, but I need your help. Let's do a little exercise. I want you to imagine that you are not in this theater tonight. You are with me in Venezuela, and we are in a hospital. I am desperate because the person I love most on the planet, my mom, is about to die. She needs erythropoietin, a medicine that will help her. And the hospital and the pharmacy are completely out. There is nothing. So, what does someone do when they are sitting next to their mother who is lying in bed in agonizing pain from the cancer that is choking the life out of her? And everyone around you is helpless to do anything. I start calling people. I call people from everywhere I can think of. I eventually find someone who can give me the medicine. Knowing that every second counts, I ran to catch the subway. And when I reach my stop and come out of the station, I am confronted by two people on a motorbike. They have a gun, and they steal my phone and then they race off as quickly as they can. There is a lot, right? There is a lot happening to me in this moment. If you have ever been held up at gunpoint, you know that it is one of the most frightening experiences as a person. It is a lot of process, but I do not have time to waste. I cannot worry about my phone right now because I have bigger concerns, so I continue on. I ran to the person's house who has the medicine and immediately ran back to the subway. My mother is uncomfortable. She is in pain, and she is waiting for the medication. And the only thing I can even think about in this moment is getting back to her bedside to be with her. What happened next sounds unbelievable, but it is what actually happened. I am almost to the subway when the entire city suddenly goes into a blackout. All of Caracas is in the dark. There are no lights, no phone, and worst of all, no subway. I am clear across the field from the hospital. It is too far by foot. The buses don't run in electricity, so I make an attempt to catch the bus. Now remember, the subway is not working, and we are in the capital city of Venezuela. Millions of people are trying to figure out to get around the city. At the same time, I am trying to get back to my dying mother. And we are all trying to catch the next bus. Despite my best efforts, it was hours before I was able to get back to the hospital. When I saw my mom, she started to cry. My sister, Maria Fernanda, hugged me so tight and wouldn't let go. They kept telling me how happy they were to see me. But in that moment, it was not the medicine they were happy about. They were just happy to see me alive. The fact I was gone for hours during a citywide blackout is obviously concern enough for my family. But their worst fears were realized when my mom received a phone call from my phone. The stranger who spoke to my mom told her that I had been killed. He was not satisfied with just the theft of my phone. He felt the need to call my mother and tell her the worst news a parent can hear. Despite her pleas to him, telling him that she was dying and waiting for me to return, he didn't care. My dad and my other sister, Ruth, were on their way to the morgue to identify my body. There was an evil inside this man that I will never understand. He chose to terrorize my family, to terrorize my mother on her deathbed. And for what? My mom died just a few days later. Now, I invite you to imagine that you are with me. One of those days, a normal day in my country, to when I open the front door to my house and see a mass protest. There are fires breaking out around me, bombs exploding nearby, people desperately screaming. Imagine seeing the street you live on that you walk down every day, a child on your way to school, now filled with heavy, nauseous smoke and the frantic cries of your neighbors. Please walk with me in another part of the city to see long line of people with buckets carrying water from the school to their houses so they can drink and cook after going week without water. Imagine with me as we wait in a line for 6 hours so we can buy a packet of rice with no guarantee there will be any less for us. Please come with me to when I spend an entire night with my friend Anne, waiting for miles in a line for an auto parts store, surrounded by desperate and determined people, just so we can get something as simple as a battery for her car. And now please, come with me to a day I will never forget. When just a block away from my house, I saw 2 little boys sitting in a car, both skinny, and their dad lying dead on the ground because someone killed him to steal his food. And now please come and feel my sadness from the time when I was kidnapped in a popular mall in Caracas, just a week before leaving my country. They took my new pair of shoes for me to give them the PIN to my debit card, and took my backpack with all my money. Imagine the disappointment I felt when the police found my backpack and took it for themselves. They told me that if I wanted them to take me home, I would have to let them keep the backpack and all my stuff because they like it. Please, come with me to Europe, Malta, and see how scared I was of being so far away from home, knowing not even a sentence in English and trying to find a job. Please, walk with me during the hours I spend handing out my CV. Sit at the computer with me. Wait with me as I pray that I use the right words and someone call me for a job. Imagine my sadness when the few emails I received were to tell me I was not employable because I wasn't European. Now, feel my excitement when I first got a call. When I first got a call from a company who offered me a job. Feel my joy as I first started working for them, scraping splattered concrete from a high window, ledge without any protection. Feel how sad and angry I became when they took advantage of my legal situation and did not pay me for a month of work. I was relieved when I got a job working in a bar, even though I had never had a drink in my entire life. Imagine how happy I was for this opportunity. And for the opportunity, one of my Maltese friends offered to me to clean his house and his friend's house twice a week. Now, I was making enough money to be able to help my family in Venezuela. But this was not my passion. I am a teacher, and I have earned a master's degree in journalism. And even though I was grateful to be cleaning houses and serving drinks, I worked hard too in my education and career as a teacher, and I wanted something more. So you can imagine now how happy I was when I got a scholarship to come to the United States in an exchange program that was interesting in bringing me as a teacher to North Carolina. It was shortly, though, because my visa was rejected by an immigration agent who thought I was going to live here illegally. My application for a visa extension to stay in Malta was also rejected. My fate brought me back to Venezuela. Now, I invite you along to my arrival back in Caracas. Picture everything I have told you before. The protests, the guns, the blackouts, the hunger, the desperation. But now, everything is 1,000 times worse. I want to invite you to my home, but please don't be offended. I have nothing to offer to you right now but mangoes I have picked from the trees. I want you to meet my lovely sister, but please know that this will be hard for us. She has completely deteriorated in a hospital from a disease very similar to lupus. She was diagnosed after I left for Malta, and now I am worried about getting her medication. The medication she needs. We all need so much in Venezuela, but there is no much left for anyone. What does someone do in this situation? We are eating mangoes of the trees and waiting hours for clean water. I decided to apply again for a visa to the United States, but this time in Montana. So you can imagine my happiness when I got a message from the principal of Missoula International School. They were interested in bringing me as a teacher. We scheduled an interview over Skype. I prepared my notes, rehearsed my broken English, wore my best clothes, and when I was ready to sit down with my prospective new employer, my internet wouldn't work. No connection. No way to tell them my passion for teaching. It was a great disappointment, but Missoula gave me another chance. And the principal understood, and he rescheduled my interview. Imagine how grateful I was for their grace and for the good internet connection and for the opportunity to make a good impression that got me the job. Again, my visa was rejected. But imagine the pride and sense of worth I felt when the school did not give up on me and continued to work for my visa until it was finally accepted. I am just one of the millions of Venezuelans that have left the country for similar or worse experiences. My heart breaks every single day when I read about hundreds of xenophobic attacks against Venezuelans in our neighboring South American countries. News about our group attacking a Venezuelan refugee camp, causing serious injuries, Venezuelan women being raped and brutally beaten, famous musicians singing xenophobic songs about Venezuelan women, referring to them as a prostitute, and the media turning the song into hits. The mayor of a city publicly stated that he does not want Venezuelan in his municipality. Members of my family have fled to those countries. Imagine how scared you would feel every single day knowing that your loved ones are still not in a safe place. I am always praying for their life and wellness. The feeling is indescribable, not being able to help everyone who is still in Venezuela, as my dad, my nieces, nephews, brother, sister. A ticket for a flight out of the country is way too expensive for me to afford all of them as one. This is a weird feeling, an uncomfortable feeling to feel safe. I am one of the lucky few who have made it to a safe community. And when I am walking down the street in downtown Missoula, and an angry person stopped his car to call me black rat when I did nothing to him, or when someone in a local store told me the sponge I was buying would be useful for taking my skin off, I still consider myself one of the lucky few. So I think, after hearing my story, you can understand how grateful I am to be part of a community that stood up to support me after they learned that this happened to me. I am thankful for you, Missoula. Not all of my days are good, but every welcoming person, every single word of support means a lot to me. I hope you understand what coming to America means to me. I was asked to give a title to my monologue tonight, and I choose coming to America with quote, because I am also American. I came from America to America. I am not any different than any one of you sitting here tonight. You came along with me and share in some of my experience. And I am thankful for you in this moment. To finish, I want to say that I am a positive person. I want to believe that this generation of Venezuelans will be the best generation ever. Our condition have created a generation of brave warriors. I want to believe that those millions of Venezuelans who are around the world will help this world get better. I want to believe that all the Venezuelan professionals, engineers, lawyers, architects, who are selling food on the streets in other countries will get the chance to work in their profession, and they will once again love their job as before. I want to believe that the Venezuelan physicians who might be cleaning toilets will soon be able to work as doctors again, and that they will love their patients as I love my students. I want to believe that Venezuelan teachers will get the opportunity to teach children in classrooms all over the world. They will help to make this world better, because we understand now that teaching empathy, compassion, and love are as important as teaching any other subject. Thank you.
All right, so this microphone's not actually on, but I need something to do with my hands.
It is on now.
Oh, it is on now. Okay, never mind, it is on now. It wasn't on during rehearsal. And those stairs are really scary. I'm proud of myself for not falling. My name's Lisa, and my monologue is enough. Growing up, I didn't receive much physical affection from my parents. Don't get me wrong, they loved me very much, but it wasn't shown through hugs and kisses. This lack of physical affection, something that I craved, is what fueled some of my decisions later in life. When I was 13 years old, I had my first kiss, but it wasn't a magical experience as I had expected. I had been chatting with men on the internet, seeking the affection that I craved. I chatted with a 19-year-old, and I told him I had not yet had my first kiss. He came over to give that to me. But it wasn't a special experience. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't okay. It was awful. There was lots of saliva. He tasted weird. And the worst part, he took his hand and started to massage me outside my pants. I pushed his hand away, but he said, "No, it's okay," and put it back. I was too scared to push it away again. I was home alone. We kissed for a few minutes, and then he left. I used to not describe this experience as sexual assault because I didn't tell him no. I didn't push him off me again. He didn't physically hold me down. I felt that I hadn't been assaulted enough. Fast forward in time to when I'm 16 years old and a virgin. I'd been dating a boy in my class for a couple months. We used to have these really long makeout sessions. I told him early on I was not interested in having sex. Twice in the middle of these makeout sessions, he would get up without saying a word and grab a condom. Both times I had to remind him I don't want to have sex. Finally, the third time he did this, I gave in. At first I said, "No, I don't want to have sex," but he put the condom on anyways and didn't say a word, and I just let him do it. I was too scared about what was going to happen. I didn't want him to break up with me. I didn't want him to tell our classmates that I was a prude. I lost my virginity that night on his bedroom floor. It wasn't special or comfortable or okay. It was awful. This was not the way that I wanted to lose my virginity. I used to not describe this experience as sexual assault because I felt that I had been assaulted enough. Fast forward in time to when I'm 21 years old. This time in my life, I had been very promiscuous, as I was using sex to fill a hole in my heart. I was struggling with my sexuality. I hadn't accepted that I'm a lesbian. I'd had sex with a boy one afternoon. I'd had sex with him before, but this time was different. In the middle of it, he stopped and said, "Let me put it in your ass." I started to say, "No, I don't want that." But before the full sentence even came out of my mouth, he put himself inside me anyways. I kind of yelped in pain and jumped back a little bit. He just sat there and stared at me. I took a couple deep breaths, and I suddenly became really scared about what would happen next. I didn't know what he was going to do. I told him I didn't want to keep going. He said, "Oh, come on, let's just finish. I won't put it in your ass again." And I just let him do it. I didn't want him to tell our friends that I was a prude, and I just wanted it to be over. When it was done, he got up and left. I used to not describe this experience as sexual assault because I felt that I hadn't been assaulted enough. 3 experiences of sexual assault. 3 experiences that I used to not describe as sexual assault. I didn't think they could be sexual assault because society didn't tell me they were sexual assault in their definition of it. I hadn't been assaulted enough. This affected me through my life. Anytime the sexual assault was brought up, I couldn't talk about it. I would never admit that I had any experience with it. I let society define what it meant. I let that push that deep and down inside of me. It wasn't until I started working at a job where I worked with sexual assault survivors that I began to accept that I had been assaulted enough, that these men had taken something from me. I listened to so many stories of men and women. I saw the pain in their eyes and the way it affected their lives. These brave men and women sharing their stories with me, they had been assaulted enough. It wasn't until I experienced that I finally accepted that it didn't matter what society defined enough was. It didn't matter what other people defined what enough was. Enough was what I defined it to mean.
My name is LJ Dawson, and this is called Your Worth. I look up into the sky in a daze. My eyesight's been a little hazy lately. I wish I'd listened to Lauren when she told me, girls, you know you better watch out. Some guys are only about that thing. I wish I'd listened to Tupac when he told me to keep my legs closed, head up and eyes open, but I didn't. I lost my worth somewhere between the pennies I threw in the change drawer. Before I even turned 15, I tried to shrink myself to a small size that could fit on a magazine. Tried to cut and squeeze myself into something one of them would notice. Convinced at a young age that I lived in a man's world where my worth equaled their opinion of me, for a while I thought it made me powerful, but I was mistaken. Over and over again, I was told my only worth was sexual. Boys told me, a girl too young to protect her worth, told me to fit into an edible shape so they could consume me, use me. I picked it up. My body was there for men, for boys, to entertain, to be broken into scaffolding to hold his life up. I went along. How could I not? I blended myself into one of the boys, thinking that it'd protect me if I became one of them, from the hips and breasts that swelled me into womanhood. See, manhood is a choice. To be a woman, our tests are preconceived, started without our consent. If we're lucky, it's only our first lesson in how women don't consent, we accept the burdens, the loads, the advances, the crimes of masculinity as our burden to bear for the miraculous gift of femininity. Just as my uterus pounds on the walls of my belly, I became used to this pain. Unaware of the divinity I let slip from my womb into their palms, they played it like video games. Boys, kids, they'd say, they make mistakes, but growing up saved them. It nearly killed me. I didn't even know I could say no when I got into a bed, so disillusioned, so limp, I acted like a string puppet, let them pull my strings. I knew men so well, I barely know myself. But to please them meant survival. Manipulate myself to safety. I've been forced to know men, hoping I could predict them well enough to keep one step ahead, safe. But everyone loses, and eventually I did. Rape, assault. They give us huge, scary words to throw about, as if his hands weren't wrecking balls enough, as if the only word that fits isn't normal. Thank you, I would tell him now. You broke the spell. After you, I blamed myself. I took a year to stand up to me, to stand in the fact that you raped me. See, I thought I was the banshee, the monster under your bed. Unlearning. Peeling the hands off my mouth. It'd been you and a short shame-bearing 15 minutes that landed me in corpse mode the next morning. Boy, I'd blame you. You made me get lost, so empty I couldn't stand, so light I ran to exist, hoping breathing wouldn't catch up to me. I wasn't sure that I could. But it didn't stop or start at you. You weren't the genesis. I won't give you that. See, you were the breaking point, because before you, my inability to look in the mirror was all that I knew. My blindness began to fade after you. When something cracked so deep in me, I don't think it will ever heal. From the crack finally spilled pain. It hurt to think that I was inhumane, but you wouldn't be the end. I just tried to forget you as I shuffled onto him and then them. I held my belly, sobbing in strangers' bathrooms, confused as to how I kept letting myself throw her around. Then there was the men who I gave nothing to, who thought that my body was theirs to mold to their desires. They turned me to molten lava every time they touched me. It burned me up with silent screams, but I stayed mum. This new metamorphosis I grew into, I didn't know her. This warrior emerging didn't trust me after all I had put her through. I don't know if she'll ever forgive me. When consent is never an option, it's hard to stop them coming through the door. Hard to have an opinion when your voice was never valued by them, only your body, your worth only defined by their misogyny. So I crawled, and then I stumbled. I whispered sweet nothings over salt baths that turned dark with shame. I lit candles and burned myself into rebirth again and again, hoping that this time all their misplaced hands and dicks would burn away. And slowly they did. I sobbed out I'm sorry's to my soul, to her, to me. My angry, why can't I say no, slowly turned into my mouth, rolling around the word like a stone until it became comfortable to spit it out at them. My warrior showed up quicker. When a stranger grabbed my body like a ripe grapefruit from a fruit tree, or lewdly pushed me back to a one-dimensional woman, or a coworker suggested I sit down, years of work and I finally began to swell into my womanhood, my worth. They still grab me. Rape is still a possibility. But I know now that there are parts of me I won't let them touch. Oh, but I'm not healed. Healing is a state of being, not an endgame. If I could fit all of them behind the word him touching me and him violating me, him crunching me into a small space, if those minutes I could push out of my existence as if my tombstone could read, lived a full life except all the minutes, days, and years men stole me from myself. If there were no presences I tried to scrub from my skin every shower, then rape, assault, abuse would be easy. Woman's initiation into femininity would be simple. Not what made me despise my limbs, my soul, all of me. That allowed them to separate me from my humanity. Who showed me so intimately my little worth as a woman in this society. How could I ever trust one of you to touch me? How could I ever trust myself? Anytime a man comes around, I snap away from my body. No one taught me to wear this skin, and my mother shrunk from her own. This world is incongruent with your being, I tell myself. So you create attempting to carve a niche for your soul, and you try to assimilate so you don't feel like a painful acid reflux every day when you catapult crash into society's webs. But, my dear, it is undoable for you to unbecome. Remember the battles for survival you've won. You are a mother, a warrior, and a goddess at once. I must teach my divinity to trust me again, emerging, a healing, a resurrection. So I am a divine, cyclical creature homing my own soul in my own body. But still, when I see him, I remember he crumpled and gobbled me whole. His hands cover my mouth still. I want to scream. I poured love into myself to get rid of him, but I must be leaky because the holes you punched into me still gush. The anger ricochets inside me. So when she called me and told me he, not the same one, but another one, got her in a pantsuit early in the morning, not like most of us drunk at parties, anger ricocheted inside of her as foreign as he had been. She calls me because she knows I know. I can't get out of bed, she said. It's okay, I told her. I got out of bed and tried to reclaim my boom drunk night after stranger for years, so the next time it inevitably happened, I was numb. I wouldn't feel it like I did the first time. Don't get out of bed, I told her. For now, being with your body is a crusade against him, because he tried to steal it. Don't let him. It hurts, but sit with it. I heard his grimy hands and her tear-soaked voice. The funny thing is, she expected it with her good men and relationships. She waited for the scary rapists. Well, me, with my shitty men and broken hearts, walked straight up to their doors. If they owned me, I might as well include delivery service. You know, in high school sex ed, she said, why don't they teach you how to be a rape victim? Because women can do everything right or everything wrong, and men will still find a way to remind us, to claim us, to drive stakes into our vaginas and burn our divinity at crosses. She called me because she knew I wouldn't try to fix it. Tell her it will be okay, because it won't. You survive, you resurrect yourself and your soul, but you never walk away whole again. You just walk, and then run, and then dance. And eventually you spin to a halt and realize you are your own body again. and you realize you are alive. That despite the rotten flesh they draped us in, our souls pushed out tiny purple flames that we fed by worshiping these unholy bodies.
Hi, I'm Kat. I'm here to talk about being hungry and dating assholes. We've all been there. The earliest memory I have of needing validation from a romantic partner about how hot I looked was when one of my high school boyfriends told me that he'd noticed I was losing weight and I was a lot hotter now. I was wearing a tie-dye shirt and light blue shorts that hit me just at the tops of my thighs. It was mid or late summer. We were lying in a park. We'd been making out for a while, ignoring the families walking by, teenagers and dicks. And then he turned to me and said, "Hey, Kat, is it okay for me to tell you that I noticed that you lost weight and that you look better?" I had chills. I had been trying so hard to look like all my thin friends and all the girls I saw on TV, and it was finally working. At last, someone found me attractive, something that I had all but given up on. All those days of Googling calorie content, working out until I was at a net 200 for the day, of snacking on almonds and telling my friends that I forgot my lunch, but it's fine, I had a big breakfast, I don't want to talk about it. It was the year I learned how to lie through my teeth. I knew all the best tricks to hide the rumbling in my stomach and still sucked in when the skinny girls walked past me in the hallway. I started recovery for anorexia 3 years later. It wasn't the last time that my relationship with my body was changed by my relationship with my partner. Sometimes I was hyper-focused on what I looked like. Sometimes recovery was harder than others, but I worked through it. And sometimes the way that my partners, all men in this case, talked about how I looked made all of that fall apart. I've heard it all, from "I like how you look, but you could look better," to "it's okay that you're kind of chubby because at least you have tits." Comments like these made it almost impossible to see my value beyond what it said on the bathroom scale and how fuckable I was to my boyfriend. I couldn't feel like I was an equal partner in these relationships. I was just something to look at and receive some pleasure from. My ex, the one I made the mistake of moving in with, spent hours and days helping me lose weight. He did this by passing judgment, whether it was through snide comments or refusing to buy the Ben & Jerry's at the grocery store. Bought it later myself because I'm an adult. And the best example of this was when all I wanted to eat for breakfast was potatoes. You've had hash browns. You know what that feeling is like. I took 2 bites and then found an almond. I love almonds. I eat almonds all the time. I didn't want almonds. I wanted fucking potatoes. It felt like he couldn't trust me to make the right decision for myself and to have something better. He was making me better because I couldn't do it on my own. I have wasted so much damn time in relationships apologizing for gaining weight, for getting lazy, for not caring as much as I should, and for embarrassing my partners, because who wants to be seen with such a fat girlfriend? Even after years of recovery, I found ways to distract my partners from what my body looked like. Maybe we can keep the lights off this time. Maybe if I keep them focused on my boobs, they won't look at my stomach. Maybe if I wear those jeans instead of these ones, they can't tell that my thighs touch unless I stand with my feet this far apart. Maybe if I give in to their sexual advances one more time, maybe if I let them coerce me one more time, they'll forgive me for what I look like. Eventually, I started to put 2 and 2 together. I started to realize that dating these assholes was setting me back my recovery process, because it is a process. It never really stops.
and I stopped trying to make up for the shortcomings of my appearance, or what I thought were shortcomings. It's starting to get better, maybe. Or maybe I'm dating better people, more women, which turns out was kind of the answer for me. But I no longer feel like my romantic partner's feelings are dependent on how much I can change for them, how much I can improve for them. Give me a few years and I'll stop giving a fuck what I look like, and I wear shorts in the summer and I walk down the street with my partner. Sure as hell not there yet, but I'll get there soon, and that's okay too. Thank you.
So that was the first half of our performance. We will take a 15-minute intermission so you can go support the Roxy by buying beer and snacks, or not beer, do your thing. So 15 minutes, I think it's like 8:40, so 9:55, back in your seats, please. Thank you. 8:55. Lots of beer. All right. Welcome back. Welcome back. We are going to get the second half started.
So I was sitting at Market on Front the other day when a stranger walked by my partner and I before turning back and pointing at the stack of books on the table and saying, "Why are you reading those?" I froze and began scrambling for words that admittedly shouldn't have been that hard to find. They're for a class. I'm working on a final. I had prayed that our conversation would end there, since the those that she was referring to were the first and second volumes of Justo Gonzalez's The Story of Christianity. Much to my dismay, she proceeded on with her questioning. "Well, what class are you taking?" The history of Christianity?" "Aha," she said. "I thought those looked familiar. I remember reading those when I was in seminary." Ah, seminary. The dreaded center of every new conversation that I ever have. And that conversation tends to go a little something like this. "Are you in school?" "Why, yes, I am." "Oh, cool. What are you studying?" Theology." "Theology? What do you want to do with that?" At this point, I've already kind of figured out where the conversation will most likely go from here. If I tell them that I'm studying theology and I'm actually in seminary school to become a pastor, will they take note of my queerness and be able and start questioning how homosexuality and ministry could ever go together? Or instead, will they start playing Bible trivia with me and inevitably coming out on top, since I just barely made it through Hebrew Bible, and despite my Methodist upbringing, I've never actually read the Bible outside of my academic studies? Or instead, they might ask me how I even got to ministry in the first place, in which case I'd have to tell them a story about a dead 17-year-old, and that's usually a topic that everybody wants to avoid. So to avoid some awkwardness and confusion, I usually settle on a phrase used by Lutheran pastor Nadia Bolz-Weber. "I want to work for a nonprofit." And the conversation ends there. You see, I'd claimed my queer identity long before I had succumbed to my Christian self. The fuzzy, way too warm feelings I had for close female friends in high school, paired with sex dreams usually involving other women, led to my questioning late in college. Eventually, I came around to accepting myself, or who I thought I was. Courtney, female, lesbian. Although I always preferred the term gay, since it seemed to allow for a lot more flexibility, tasted less like metal in my mouth, but also might have been a play of the patriarchy at work. After coming out, I did my best to avoid gender and the topic of gender identity with a 10-foot pole. I had always kind of considered myself a little bit more of a tomboy, and I still figured, much like using the term gay, that the patriarchy was still at work, and my cringing at feminine words and feminine presentation had everything to do with how we tend to view women in our society and culture. Then, before taking off into seminary, I would cut off all my hair and begin performing as a local drag king, allowing myself the space to express a part of myself I had long been avoiding. When I was at my orientation at Isla School of Theology in Denver, Colorado back in the fall, I found myself sitting in a room full of strangers. In front of me was a name tag, and it had my name, my hometown, and a blank space for me to fill in my pronouns. Before this moment, I had always known what would go here. Courtney, female, she, her. But suddenly, none of that seemed to fit, and I didn't know what to do. Like many things queer, I wasn't positive as to what the rules were here. There were other non-binary folk in the room, and while I didn't know them and they didn't know me, I was worried I might offend them by trying on the hat that I'd always thought I kind of liked, but was afraid of what I might find if I put it on. So after texting a few trusted close friends and getting some reassurance, this is your story, this is your identity, and if this is what you need to go for, try it. I inevitably wrote they, them, theirs in that blank space, and eventually purchased the hat that I had always admired, because after all, it fit. And I didn't just like the way it looked, I felt confident in it. So how did I end up in that room in the first place? Well, I mentioned earlier, there's usually a topic that everybody wants to avoid. It involves a dead 17-year-old, but I hope there's a positive twist in the story. I had originally pursued my undergrad degree in psychology here at the University of Montana. My plans were to someday become a licensed counselor to help struggling teens. Ironically, this pursuit was inspired by my time as a camp counselor at Flathead Lake United Methodist Camp. I had always wanted to make an impact on the world, but I didn't think that any of this Jesus crap would have anything to do with it. At Flathead Lake United Methodist Camp, it was here that I had the privilege of meeting and mentoring a young woman named Maddie. Maddie was a great human being with a dark past and a bright spirit. She was the kind of person, she was the kind of person that could walk into a room and have everybody laughing and crying all in the same breath. She was constantly looking out for those around her, and one year when a fellow camper fell off the ledge of one of our camp cabins, Maddie was the first one there to check on her before any of the counselors could get there. One year, in a small group, when asked how she saw or experienced God, Maddie admitted to those around her that she had never felt or experienced God. And given her traumatic childhood and some of the things that she'd gone through, this answer made a whole lot of sense. By the end of that same week, she had confided in a co-counselor of mine that perhaps she never felt or saw God because Maddie wholeheartedly believed that God, the Spirit, might actually be working through her. I played witness to the Spirit working through Maddie a time or two before in my life. And in my most recent memory of this, Maddie and I were catching up at a park in Columbia Falls, Montana, drinking chai and coffee. She was filling me in on all sorts of new things. She was homeless, but staying with a friend's house since her and her grandparents had been fighting and it wasn't a safe place for her right now. She had a new boyfriend, and she reassured me that he was a really great, really awesome, really amazing guy. She had just gotten out of rehab and had felt like she had finally found a new path in her life, that she finally had hope. She was looking forward to her senior year of high school and pursuing dental hygienist school following graduation. But most importantly, Maddie was looking forward to being at Flathead Lake Camp later on that summer. I told Maddie my recent updates. I was entering my senior year of college, and I had picked up a second degree in political science. I had totally tossed psychology, aside from the degree, out the window and was looking forward to pursuing a career in public administration instead. I also told Maddie that I was getting ready to leave for Midler Camp the following day, and I was looking forward to seeing her later on in the summer at senior high camp. When Maddie and I parted ways, she had promised that she'd keep in touch and contact a friend of mine who worked for Sparrow's Nest to sort out her living situation if things with her grandparents didn't go well. I had left our conversation questioning the new path that I had chosen. After talking to Maddie, I began to feel an indescribable nudge to do something bigger, something more, but I couldn't name it. 1 week later, I'd get a phone call late at night from my co-counselor and friend Hattie. There was a car accident, and it was Maddie. She didn't make it. Earlier that same day, a family friend had posted on Facebook asking where all the fire trucks were headed. A comment read, "A car accident on Highway 93. It was the same one. The next day, the same counselor that Maddie had confided into about God and the Spirit, he had told me to look for the signs and that I'd be able to find Maddie and her spirit anywhere that I went. Following her funeral, a massive rainstorm had just passed, and Hattie and I were standing out on a friend's porch in Lakeside, and we watched as a vibrant rainbow broke through the clouds over our Flathead Lake United Methodist camp. Since then, I've seen a rainbow on some of my worst days, and I've likened these to waves from Maddie. Whenever I'm trying to discern something, and especially my call to ministry and to seminary, I don't pray to God, I pray to Maddie. When asking Maddie about seminary, she came to me in a dream as a rainbow, and as dreams do, the rainbow turned into a ribbon, came to me, and a voice said, "Trust me." So I grabbed hold and never turned back, setting out on a journey that, much like the dream and Maddie's death, makes little sense, but I'm on it anyway. When I step in a new space, I become hyper-aware of two things: my non-binary identity and my faith in Christianity. I dread being misgendered or the awkward conversations surrounding pronouns, because after all, they, them, theirs aren't preferred pronouns, they are my pronouns. And trying to get people to wrap some sense around that is really difficult. Despite these awkward encounters, it's important to recognize that our world is designed for binaries and heteronormativity. And these conversations and these moments are opportunities to break down some of those walls, some of those barriers, and smash some of that patriarchy and make room for a more gender and sexual fluid world. But whenever someone starts to ask me about my schooling, I freeze. We start using words like seminary, theology, ministry, and God, and I'm uncomfortable. And I know what you might be thinking. Shouldn't you, a Christian, be praising the name of the Lord with confidence? Well, sure, if I bought into that Jesus is my boyfriend rhetoric. But as a member of the LGBTQ+ community, I'm far too aware of how damaging, exclusive, and heavy-handed the word God can be. Yet in spite of my doubt, I'm still pursuing a path to ministry because I believe that I am called to create inclusive, spiritual, and faith-based spaces for the LGBTQ community. I'm following my call to create these spaces because I, to quote Thomas Prower from his book, Queer Magic, I believe that our inability to perfectly fit in with those around us just might signify that it's because we, queer folk, are better suited as dual citizens of the physical and spiritual worlds. I'm following my call because I believe that the spirit, universe, goddess, mother nature, whatever you name it, makes no mistakes. I believe that she created each and every one of us with unique and divine purpose. And I believe that if a 17-year-old kid could come to realize that she couldn't see the spirit at work because the same spirit was working through her, that spirit is working in each and every single one of us. My name is Courtney Von Lindern. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs. Thank you.
Against the odds, I am a scientist. I'm in my third year of university studying human biological science and exercise science, as well as the prerequisites to attend medical school. And while that may sound at least mildly impressive, I am not at all confident nor secure in my intelligence. You see, I was told time and time again, like so many young women, that I did not measure up to my male counterparts. Not in elementary school, not in middle school, not in high school, and sometimes not even now. You see, women in the STEM field are often portrayed as hardworking, strong-willed, and determined, which is all true, but we're often not depicted as having natural intelligence. My teachers in high school would have me to believe that all of my academic success came directly from hard work and not at all any natural ability. Though typically subconsciously, my professors and peers often feel the same way today. I came from a really small town. My graduating class had 14 students in it. 4 of us excelled academically, 2 of us were female and 2 were male. And when it came time for graduation and applying to colleges, my female classmate and I were set up to be valedictorian. I had the highest standardized test our school had gotten in over 4 years, and when I went to talk to my guidance counselor about what I wanted to do with my life, which was to become a physician, she sounded surprised. She began to tell me about the difficult math and science courses I would have to take, and I explained to her that I was going to be valedictorian and that I had a great ACT score, but she already knew that. She then explained to me that I actually wasn't as smart as the 2 boys in my class that were also near the top. I just worked a lot harder than them. This one's great at math, and this one's fantastic at chemistry, and you, dear, you're okay at both, but it's just your hard work that got you here. Somewhere along the way, teachers or society or the Illuminati or somebody decided that women have to work harder than men to achieve the same results. Allow me to lay out a scenario for you. Jim and I are in the same biochemistry course. At the end of the semester, I have an A and Jim has a B. That's no skin off Jim's back because it's a belief that he could have achieved an A if he'd only applied himself more. As for me, well, I tried really hard, and this time it was enough. But essentially, Jim and I are of equal capability when it comes to biochemistry. Now, if we flip it around, Jim got an A and I got a B. Jim is a goddamn genius because he didn't even have to try to get that A, and meanwhile, I worked really hard and I just still came up short. Jim is now twice as smart as me when in the former scenario, we were equals. I once went to a talk by Margot Lee Shetterly, the author of Hidden Figures, the novel about the women of color who worked behind the scenes at NASA to get the United States to the moon. And she spoke about a lecture hall course that she'd observed in which the students were all asking questions. After about 3 consecutive questions, there were still a dozen hands in the air, and the flustered professor said, okay, I have time for one more question. He then called on a student, and then all the women in the room put their hands down. From the way that I'm telling the story, I bet you can guess whose hands were in the air, who continued to have their questions answered. You see, women are not allowed to demand anything. We lack the luxury of fighting for our education because we are taught, and so we believe that our first and most important duty is to be obedient. When the professor says one more question, that means one more question, and you put your hand down. Men aren't held to these same standards, and that's not only unfair, but it's also damaging the education and the liberation of women. We aren't taught the same way, so we don't believe ourselves to be as intelligent, and because we don't believe ourselves to be intelligent, we lack the confidence to demand that we be taught the same way. We're not allowed to believe that we're smart. In fact, if our intelligence is applied, we're often embarrassed by it. I hate to imagine the number of times I've said the words, yeah, but I'm not smart or anything, I just work really hard. The garbage that I've been force-fed since high school. So, we're not smart, but we are hardworking, determined, strong-willed, and tough, which is all great, but we're often shamed for those qualities and for having the drive to seek our goals. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to women in my classes start their questions with, I'm sorry, but we don't need to be sorry. We don't have to be obedient, and we certainly don't need to be unsure of ourselves. So, I am a scientist. I'm in my 3rd year of university studying human biological science and exercise science as well as the prerequisites to attend medical school, and you can bet your ass that I'm an intelligent, hardworking, driven, strong-willed, and tough woman, and I don't give a damn if you only have time for one more question.
I'm a woman in STEM too. It's a big old mood. So before the last monologue, I would like to give some thank yous. There are a lot, so I have them written down to not forget anyone. First and foremost, the University of Montana Alumni Association funded the filming of this production, which will be out sometime. Get back to you on that. They also funded to have this space in the Roxy Theater, which is amazing of them. I would also like to thank the Davidson Honors College at the University of Montana for paying for the beautiful programs that you have in front of you. I would also love to thank them for giving me a space to first pursue this project and supporting me in every way possible over the last 3 years. I would like to thank David Macaluso for complimenting me on my feminist as fuck shirt on that fateful day when I first learned that I could talk to you about all of this. I would like to thank Abby Banstra, who was my first feminist mentor, and I would like to thank Francesca Snow for being my first feminist peer and struggling through all of that with me. I would like to thank my parents for being amazing role models and supporting me and my many insanely stressed out phone calls this week. I would like to thank my marvelous friends for being here and supporting me and also helping my freakouts this week. I would like to thank all of you audience members for being here today. I am an optimist by nature, and I did not think we were going to fill this space, and we turned people away. So I'm very sorry for those of you who couldn't make it in, but I'm also so stoked that we needed a bigger theater. It's amazing. This event is my heart and soul, and the fact that I could share it with you and that you were willing to spend your Thursday night here with me and all of these amazing speakers is amazing. And of course, the most important group of people to thank, the monologists. Vulnerability is a radical act of bravery, and I am honored, that all of you are a part of this event. Thank you.
All right, let's move this mic around a little bit. Most exciting part of the show. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Nathaniel Brown, and this monologue is positively okay. At the bright young age of 6, I was diagnosed with 2 things: optimism and Asperger's syndrome. My mother, fearing for my future health, safety, and ability to cope in the real world, did her best to believe that this was something I could grow out of. The optimism, of course, not the autism. Ever the realist, she was afraid that if I set my expectations too high, I would live a life of constant disappointment, that I would be crushed under the weight of my own hopes. I'm so pleased to say that this hasn't been the case. As a queer man on the autism spectrum, I have known what it is like to be afraid for your own future. And these days, it seems we can look all around us and see that same fear reflected in each other's eyes, or hands or feet, as the case may be. But I choose to stand strong by my optimism, to cherish it and hold it close to my chest as if it were the only thing that I have left. Because sometimes it is. And I will tell you honestly and from the bottom of my heart that the belief that everything will be okay is something to hold on to when everything else has fled. It's a reason to keep loving and hoping and fighting. And if we can do that as strongly and as often as we can, it will be. Not in spite of adversity, but because of it. Kids on the autism spectrum often develop a special interest, a passion for a specific topic or idea that borders on obsession. Mine was something that's shared by many kids, but I had a particular way of expressing it. Of course, it was dinosaurs. I had amassed a massive collection of dinosaur figures that I cherished with all my heart, and I would spend hours with them doing my favorite thing in the world, organizing. I would spend days and days separating them into groups based on taxonomic rank, then rearranging them chronologically, then by approximate habitat. I would play God over my little Mesozoic world, making sure everything was logical and governed by set rules, as it should be. I wish I could do the same for people. I wish I could play God again and move them around like little chess pieces so they would behave in a way that made sense. I can't make a perfect world happen just by willing it. What I can do is work to make it possible. In the 7th grade, I was given a nickname, not really an accurate one, and one that was clearly a result of inherited cruelty, but regrettably, it stuck. One high schooler, seeing me, a chubby little kid on the back of the bus, excitedly waving his hands at the chance of finally arriving home, decided that what I now understand was a form of stimming was weird enough to earn me the nickname Goat Fucker. What I now understand was clearly a result of misdirected generational racism at the time, simply her. And sure, I didn't deserve a name like that, no child does. But what I deserved even less was the belief that I would have a label like that on me forever. Hopelessness, the belief that humanity cannot improve and will dole out the same kind of treatment generation after generation, is the kind of attitude that made that student feel she had the right to label me that way. The kind of attitude that made me feel at the time that it was okay. Pessimism has and will only ever benefit the status quo. True change can only happen if we first believe that it can. By the time I reached my sophomore year of high school, I had realized I was queer, that I was a bisexual man. It's not the most fortunate thing to know about yourself growing up in rural Montana, but I did. Luckily, at this point in my life, and maybe for the first time, I had friends. Quite a few wonderful and loving friends whose overwhelming reaction was, yeah, sure, whatever. Or, yeah, no, that makes sense. My mom's reaction was to automatically assume I'd be stabbed in a dark alley somewhere and buried in an unmarked grave. The thing is, she grew up in a time and place where that was not only possible, but likely. And in many places in the world it still is. But to my friends, my peers, it was just another blip in the weird map of my identity. For me, that was the only convincing it took. The time gap between those two attitudes was less than 4 decades. It was all the proof I needed to know that progress is not only possible, but inevitable. That leading a life loved first is righteous and justified, and that suffering is most certainly painful and unnecessary, but I will die before I'll say it's in vain. The world is a scary, fucked up place. I know that. We've all seen it. It takes 5 seconds with the newspaper to know that for sure. It is so easy to feel sad and disenfranchised and alone, and no one can tell you not to feel that way. Those emotions are justified, valid, and important. But it's equally important that for all the fear and anger, there's a possibility every single day that tomorrow will be brighter. We owe it to ourselves to believe that. I'm still that weird little kid with a passion for dinosaurs and a dumb haircut. I still shake my hands and hold a conversation as if I'm the only one participating in it. I'm just a little bigger now. I will always leave a room randomly if I don't care enough to be there, and I'll always think that Bria at the back of the bus was an asshole. But most of all, I'll always think, hell, always know, everything is going to be absolutely, positively okay.
One really important thing that I forgot to mention, there is a, thank you. Thank you. There is a donation jar that's actually an empty plant pot, because that's all I could find. If you put any money in there, it's going to go to a scholarship for students who are interested in social activism and creating more things like this in Missoula. So that is what that is for. If you are so inclined, please donate. If not, no worries, and come back next year. Thank you all so much.